Welcome back to Sikistan and welcome back to S&C Coaches React. We're reacting today to a very highly requested one, another sprinter, Mathias Johansen. He is from Norway. He is 23, a little bit younger than our last sprinter we did, which was Mr. Su Bingtan.
Just a little bit.
Matty's very active on YouTube and he's done a lot of training. Now, I think what a lot of people are wondering about with Mathias' stuff is the use of his Olympic lifts, because he's some very good Olympic lifts in here. Just from the outset, just to let you know, I think most of this training is great.
Yeah.
Like very, very, very good training. A lot of it lines up with what the literature says for sprinting. A lot of it makes sense. Some of the stuff probably wouldn't be doing, but it's not the actual exercise doing itself, but it's some of the nuance around that, so it's some smaller stuff that we'll voice our opinion on.
Yeah, I think overall it's very, very well based, very well grounded. If you watch his videos of him training, like there's nothing mental in there. Training volume's quite high. He's a full-time athlete.
Yes.
It's kind of what you'd expect. It's just unfortunate that in sprinting, the only thing that seems to matter is your genetics the day you pop out of the womb.
Drugs and genetics.
Like,
you can only get slower in sprinting, basically.
Yeah, like you can't train your way to sub 10 seconds. Like, it's very, 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 very unlikely that if you're not genetically predisposed and you have a great system behind you that you're ever going to achieve it. We were joking before we did this video that probably the best way to train for sprinting is to sprint 100 meters once every 2 weeks and then just lie at home for the rest of the time.
For top end velocity training, for top end speed, it's nearly easier. You're more likely to make yourself slower than you are with training. So there's so a lot of this would be muscle fiber distribution. So you'd have a lot of it going from type 2X preferably, which would be the favorite one, which is up in the air. If how much it occurs in humans and how much you keep it, then you've type 2A moving into type 1 fibers. A lot of training can accidentally or incidentally move your type 2A to type 1. So like from fast twitch to slow twitch. And that's something you'd never want as a sprinter. You'd never ever want that, So training for sprinting is very nuanced. And, well, let's just get into it. So we're doing, first video is 2022 Sprints Training Week. Okay, so first clip, we've got Mathias is doing kind of a warm-up, doing a lot of single leg stuff. I think he kind of calls this his mobility stuff. In some ways, especially with hip mobility, you could never be too loose for sprinting upstream there. So you never want any restrictions on your hips. You don't want any kind of lateral deviation of internal rotation, pulling your hip and knee inwards, or you don't want any, limitations in external rotation. Like, you want that nice and free. Now, you don't want to be loose, but you certainly want full range of motion. So you want to be maintaining in a nice, free movement across the midline. So he's very good depth squats there. You don't want any of these restrictions, especially because it's such a ballistic sport and there's such high speed. You don't ever want any potential for injury. So, mobility like that, as best as you can, is very, very useful.
It's funny then, like one of the other things you're dealing with the whole time as a sprinter is stiffness. Like most of your training or a lot of your training is going to deal with knee and ankle stiffness. So it's a weird kind of paradoxical thing where you want to be very loose around the midline, have a lot of control around the midline, yet you want to be so rigid and so tense along your distal kind of joints.
So we've been warming up for a plyometric session here. So muscles need to be very, very elastic to produce the most amount of force, especially in conjunction with the tendons. So like Fitz said, we have like a very fine line between maintaining rigidity and the quality of our movement, but then we want very free and elastic muscles for them to produce as much force as possible so they can contract and relax as fast as they possibly can. So he's warming up for some hurdles. Some nice hops here.
Yeah.
Great ground contact time. So one of the big things you're looking at in plyometric training is minimizing ground contact time. So you want to hit the ground as fast as you possibly can, and then leave the ground in as hard and fast as you can, and leave the least amount of ground contact time. You want to touch the floor for as short as a possible time as you possibly can.
What we have then is some slightly resisted sprints, or it looks like they're resisted sprints. Interesting thing with this is it seems to be like a handheld unit of resistance, so it's very, very, very slight amounts of resistance with kind of a light rope on them. Probably working there in like that acceleration phase, that initial phase, that burst out of the block, or else they could actually just be warming him up for that initial acceleration phase as he's doing some work from the blocks next.
Yeah, so we've got some block work, some reaction time. So again, this is like sport specific stuff. So he's doing his drills or whatever from training, so work from the blocks. Obviously, all sections of the sprint are very, very important. Matty seems to do anything from 60-meter relays or 400 meters up to 300-meter sprints. So he is, it's all incredibly important.
Some interesting stuff on the reaction time. So you'll see people now where they have sensors in the blocks. They have a sensor in the start gun. Obviously, they're not using a start gun here, but they're literally tracking your reaction time. You can train reaction time to be very, very good. So you'll see for Olympics and for most international sprint events now, you'll see people getting like false starts when they actually start out of the blocks after the gun has gone off. But they've calculated the time it takes for you to process an auditory signal, turn that into a motor unit firing and going. So even though you could see someone on a very, very high resolution slowed down camera, you'll see a gun going off and then the person coming out of the blocks and that being given as a false start. But they've actually calculated it down so they know how long you can be very, very fast at reaction times. There's only a certain amount you can cut it down by.
So next we've got Mathias doing some weighted sprints. So the first thing you'd need to understand about weighted sprints is that the literature is kind of mostly not in favour of the use of weighted sprints. However, we do see a lot of international sprinters using weighted sprints in their training. Now the kind of interesting thing about that is when you're using them, the idea behind a lot of people when we're using, weighted sprints or weighted plyometrics is we kind of have this concept like you would with resistance training. So people assume that, I lift a particular weight for a number of sets and reps. My body decides that this is a particularly monumental task, and if I have to do this again, I want to be over prepared for it. So we go through the cycle of fatigue. We're slightly weaker for a period of time. Then we super compensate up, and our muscles can produce more force. And so there's this kind of idea that does this work too for plyometric training or high velocity movements? In general, the answer is no. It doesn't work like that. You need to move at the speed you want to move at. However, we do see, when they use these weighted sprints, we do see them using a very, very small percentage of their body weight. So it's never a case of, okay, so if I can run 100 meters at 12 seconds with 5% of my body weight, if I run 100 meters in 20 seconds with 50% of my body weight, I'm going to super compensate, I'm going to have a much faster speed. It doesn't seem to work like that. But when we do see the coaches using them, we see a very, very small percentage of weight. It literally looks like a 2.5 to 5 kilo plate in addition to the sled for here. So if you are using them, it's very, very important that you maintain a very minimum amount of your body weight, a very, very small amount of that body weight.
The other time you can see them used is being used to drill in certain technical aspects. So getting somebody to stay inclined over, to get them to really lean forward into it. It might also be altering their stride length, or it might be altering their stride frequency. So it's forcing them to put more strides on the ground more quickly. So you really don't know when you see someone in a session like this. It's not necessarily a thing of like, Mathias is doing this and I want to be as fast as Mathias, so I should go and do it. There are a host of reasons somebody could be using something like this, and it's not necessarily always going to be that like physiological adaptation that will actually make you faster.
If anyone has done any sprints and they've used weighted sprints in your training and it made you faster, if you could kind of, if it's something you can contribute to, I'd be interested to hear in the comments.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's great, especially for things in the literature on sprinting, because there's a lot of nuance in it. But of course, like all sports, it is important to pay attention to what people have done successfully in the past, as success leaves clues. So Matty's just doing some little cute doggy. Hello. So he's in pretty Scandinavia doing some, I think, general conditioning, obviously, which is very, very important. I'm not sure at what point in the training week this was in his athletic career, but obviously, we did kind of joke saying that you're probably better off not training at all to do sprinting because you're only getting it slower. But everyone needs some kind of work capacity, especially when you're doing high volume of training. So a general aerobic fitness is very, very important, that kind of baseline stuff, which you've touched on a lot in the past. Let me just edit this out.
I thought you wanted to come at the possible well-being side effects of exercising in nature one.
Do you want to talk
very
about
interesting. A lot of studies on it.
So we've got him in the gym. We've got some Copenhagen planks. I really like how much Mathias is doing his like pre-session mobility and stuff. He's really doing. He's got his like. It looks like he's doing McGill Big Tree or some variation of it. cat dogs, cow dogs, moo dogs,
Up dogs.
up dogs, down dogs. So a lot of warm up, very, very thorough warm up. He's trying to keep his hips and lower body as healthy as possible, as engaged as possible.
The other thing that's important to know with Mathias, and probably that's very different from a lot of the other reactions we do, is that this is his channel. So we get to see a lot more of the kind of peripheral stuff that goes on. A lot of the time we look at sprinters and we do reactions to athletes, we see like the power cleans in the gym, or we see med ball slams, tire flips, all this kind of flashy stuff. Whereas we get to see everything that's happening here. You know, we get to see all the side planks, all the rolls, everything that's going on a daily basis, and that makes a massive difference for getting a better idea for how he's actually training and how like his day is planned out.
So very, very thorough warm up, which is very, very good to see. You know, he's a diligent athlete. He does want to get injured. He wants to improve performance as much as possible. So he's doing this as thoroughly as possible. So we have a load of single leg stuff. So you might remember from Su Bing Tian's video, these kind of the concentric only machines. Similar idea here with these. They're obviously quite popular in sprinting world at the moment over the last few years. So these kind of simulated single leg drills, single leg plyometrics. What do you think of these?
I don't know what I think of that one.
Yeah, I don't know either. So if you're looking at this from a couple of different angles, you might be, is this replicating a sport specific movement? And then if you are, in general, in most things, you want to be doing the exact same movement you're doing in the sport. You don't want to be altering it. Then this wouldn't be a great idea. If you are doing single leg plyometrics, this might not be the most productive.
You know,
yeah,
if you're looking to condition someone's hamstring to be able to take a lot of load,
yeah,
like you're landing down single end, we're probably not focusing so much, or we shouldn't be focusing so much on the jump up,
yes,
but more on the landing down on the leg. That could be quite interesting there. Like you're getting a lot of eccentric loading under fairly high amounts of force, you know.
Yeah, so hamstrings are massively involved in sprinting. They're incredibly important. So they are probably the most injured muscle in, I would say, any form of velocity training or sprinting. Hamstrings are the prime killers, you know. And you can head that off if you're correct with your training, if you're smart with it. So maybe this is certainly involved in this. So again, more of that concentric only kind of thing, or well, it's not technically concentric only, I know, but the band is assisting him on the eccentric.
Or else he's trying to pull the dip bar across the gym.
So let's move on. Okay, here's some so there's some useful for people who are doing plyometric stuff in general. It doesn't matter what sport you're doing. So we talked earlier about that kind of ground contact time when you're doing these jumps. So these are kind of hops or touch and go hops. I feel like there's a better word for those.
These are quite slow.
Yeah.
In there's like ground reaction time is the thing you always track. So like if you're standing on a force bay, you can get a host of measures. You can get ground reaction forces. You can get the direction those forces are imparted in. If it's two plates next to each other, you can see the difference between a right leg and left leg. You can see difference in fatigue as you go through a stage of 5 jumps. You might have one leg wearing out more than the other. But the main thing you're nearly always tracking on those is ground reaction or ground contact time, right? So the amount of time it takes for your foot to hit the ground, you to impart force again, and your foot to leave the ground. Most of the time when you're doing rebounding jumps like this, you want that time interval to be as slow as or to be as short as possible. There's a problem though. So if I make that interval really, really short and I'm not good at those rebounding jumps, I'm barely going to jump off the ground, and I'll end up getting 2 or 3 jumps in. My vertical displacement will be tiny, and I'll barely be able to do 5 or 6 of these in a row, and I'll get almost nothing out of them. What happens is we tend to spend longer on the ground. We'll put more force into the ground. We'll get a small bit higher, and then that compounds on top of itself again because I'm coming down from a higher height. I have more kinetic energy coming into the ground. I then have to put my brakes on harder, and then that interval of me being in contact with the ground gets bigger again. So these are just a small bit too slow for me.
Yeah. I actually think they speed up a little bit later in the video. So we move on to some weighted jumps. So weighted plyometrics are something that are very, very interesting. And in this case, you know, there's definitely some thoughts you could apply to it, and you could come to conclusions for yourself. So there is the lower body dynamic power hypothesis, which basically says that the limbs of the lower body produce the most force at the user's own body weight. And this has been very, very well established. There's been numerous studies supporting each other where they have recreated in different countries where unweighted movements, unweighted plyometrics, unweighted jumps are when you produce the most power. And every kilo you add weight, you reduce the power with that. There also is the opposite is true, which I think we'll actually get to in a little bit later. The more assistance you put with the body, the more power you seem to be producing. Now, a different metric goes up as you add weight. So like Darren mentioned earlier, there was ground reactive forces. So while his power output is actually going down when he adds weight, his ground reactive forces are going up. Now, the use of those are yet unclear. Does more ground reactive forces? You would say in theory there's a possibility that if I can put more force into the ground faster, can I run faster? And you would think that would certainly be the answer. But if you're reducing power output and you're jumping slower, are you negatively affecting, your motor unit recruitment? Are you negatively affecting the fiber types you have? So I think if I was training an elite level sprinter, I would not be doing weighted plyometrics. In fact, for anyone, bar potentially weightlifters and maybe powerlifters and maybe shot putters, but anyone else looking for speed and plyometrics, I would be staying on the safe side of weighted plyometrics, and that would be not doing them.
Mm-hmm, definitely.
So you can really see there.
Yeah.
I know it's still fast, but it's
and they're high. Like they are fast and they are high, but like you'll see he's pulling his heels up off the ground to try and get longer off the ground.
Yeah.
So
if you are doing plyometrics or weighted jumps, or you're doing some like weighted trap bar jumps, the weight again needs to be very, very low. We're not looking for, I think Gabriel said he did stuff like 220 kilos. You'll see though, he might be getting some kind of post-activation potentiation here, because when he goes back to the unweighted ones, they're definitely a lot faster.
Yeah.
One thing I have a comment in here, and everyone makes this mistake, is the shoe wear Mathias is using is not ideal. So any form of shoe where we have a very spongy heel is not something we want to be doing when we're doing any form of kind of weighted movements like this when we're applying force, because the force we apply into the ground is reduced due to kind of feedback mechanisms from our CNS. If we feel like we're in an unstable environment, as a protective mechanism, we will reduce the force we're applying into the ground. And so when we're doing things like weighted jumps, you don't want those. You want to be able to do maximum amount of force as fast as possible. So you'd want to be looking at barefoot or a much flatter and a much harder soled shoe for these. So that's something, again, for a lot of people watching, be very aware of what kind of shoes you're using when you're doing plyometrics. Then there's also, some benefit to obviously wearing some softer soled shoes as well, is it's a bit easier on your joints. From the rack with straps.
He's definitely very proficient with the barbell.
Yes, they're great. They're
like
super
they're
fast.
So nice.
Yeah.
I like the fact that they're heaving hangs as well.
Yeah.
Like obviously if you're a weightlifter you wouldn't want to be doing those all the time, but the fact that they're heaving hangs, he gets a lot of that kind of dynamic eccentric loading.
So there's something really not often talked about, but unless you'd see it in kind of biomechanics or muscle physiology, one of the most important things for athletes is the ability to relax after a contraction. So oftentimes you think about how fast can we contract, but the time it takes you to go from full contraction to full relaxation so you can contract again is something that is very, very important. So that is something you can get a lot of benefit from the Olympic lifts if you are really good at them. But all this area in between where you're shit at them to when you're really good at them is probably worse for your speed training. It's probably more injury prone, takes up too much time, and it's unlikely to be beneficial until you get to this level of proficiency. So if you could do heaving hang cleans like this, where you're going as fast as possible, contracting, relaxing, and reducing that interval as much as you possibly can, then it's certainly beneficial. And I think the way he's doing these, it's definitely a good thing.
Yeah, velocity meter on the bar.
Yeah.
Like he has everything he needs.
Yeah. So these rebounds as well are so contract, relax. So if you imagine a sine wave of contracting, relaxing, you want to be juicing these intervals as much as possible so you can do more contractions per second, and if you do more contractions per second, the faster you can move, and the faster you can move, the more wastes you hopefully can win.
These are nice.
Yeah, these are very, very good.
Very short time in contact with the ground. Really, really nice.
Yeah. if you watch as well, his heels are barely touching the ground, so you know
you really don't want heels touching the ground.
So all mammals jump from the forefoot. It's very, very interesting. Dogs, fucking horses, people,
everything.
Name another mammal that jumps. Kangaroo. Yeah, I like these hang snatches, like as fast as you can possibly do them. Again, not ideal in the Pegasus Light 9600s.
No, and not ideal if you want to be a weightlifter, but if you want to be a sprinter, slightly narrow grip so you're not sacrificing any kind of wrist injury or anything like that.
Yeah.
Again, velocity being tracked on the barbell.
That's great.
These are great. These are the textbook for why you want Olympic lifts to be used for an S&C application.
Yeah, he's got very high velocity. You know, typically at heavier weights, you'd be looking at like maybe 1.5 meters per second. He's currently at 3.6. You know, and that's what you want. The weights don't massively matter. It's the speed of the weights you're lifting is the benefit you're getting for sprinting. So more warm up, more track stuff. So this is a full training week, so it's really great to see this stuff.
One thing you'll see here that we didn't see in their, I don't know, was it an acceleration session, whatever, but these are like stride timers. So you'd use these for a host of reasons. If you were a field sports athlete, you might be using these in the way you'd use ladders or small hurdles where you have people moving their feet quite quickly. They might be doing it as agility work. A lot of the time when they're using these, they're trying to pace out their steps, so make sure every stride is on time. They might be using them to make sure those knees aren't coming too high or making sure the knees are coming high enough. There's a host of reasons you're using those small blocks, but again, it's very unlikely you're using those small blocks to make you a faster sprinter.
I think he's just doing some fun. Okay, so I really like this part of his plyometric training. So he's doing triple jump, single leg hops, it looks like. Yeah, so obviously very, very important unilateral work for sprinting, plyometric stuff. I really like about this though is that he's landing on the pad. So you're just saving your joints. There's no need for him to be smashing into the ground at the end of the plyometrics if you can at all avoid it. You know, all of these add up. So ideally, you would just leave them alone.
Yeah.
Single leg bounds.
So athletic.
Yeah, he's incredibly athletic.
Like very, very nice. You'll see even landing on the mat, rolling off it.
Yeah.
Quite high hurdle for double leg hops.
Getting a little bit higher each time.
Yeah.
I like it.
No, it's really good. Like the training, the quality of movements, the quality of the programming looks phenomenally good, as you'd expect.
Yeah. Everything is fast.
Yeah.
Ooh, single leg hops over those.
Yeah. So these single leg hops over a high obstacle like that where you're not moving your center of mass a huge amount, like once again, you're not doing that to get higher at jumping or higher to jump off one side. You're probably doing it to try and build some resilience in that landing leg, try and improve landing mechanics on that landing leg. There's a host of reasons you'd be doing them besides just getting stronger and faster.
So then we have another kind of plyometric session with the medicine balls, slams. Yeah.
Maybe improve some power output. Make sure your anti-rotation or your rotational strength is quite good.
Okay, so we've got Friday morning session. Again, loads of mobility throughout this, so that's very, very interesting. So this is something that's very interesting we talked about earlier. So if we go in one direction, we reduce power output from the lower limbs. If we add weight, we can go in the opposite direction, it seems, from some of the studies. There's one from, is it Belgrade? There was a study recently, a pretty good one on these. So accommodating resistance, so the band is helping him jump higher and faster.
I love this.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting.
This is obviously it's not an ideal situation, but it gives you a good idea for like people will always say, oh, you can't do accommodative resistance during sprinting, you know, or you can't do it during jumping, or you can't do it during whatever your sport is. Like there's a huge amount of stuff you could do. Even finding a hill that was slightly downhill will improve the speed you're able to run at. In this case, he's using a moderately tense band just thrown over a pergola in his garden. I really, really like that.
So again, a lot of the weighted jumps, it's probably something I would definitely be staying away from. And maybe his coach is like, no, I've had like 20 athletes do this at high level and they've definitely gotten faster.
Could also be in like an off-season period.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not sure what time of the year he's in.
I would still be, you know, on the no side of weighted jumps. If you were asking, if you're looking for yourself, you know, it's rare. You can get lots, like it's the risk, I think, when you do weighted jumps, you're making yourself a little bit slower, as opposed to unweighted jumps, you know.
It does look like he's doing PAP. like post-activation potentiation,
Yeah.
doesn't it? Where he's doing them with the bar. But then with the PAP stuff, like...
It's really heavy weights.
Yeah, you should be really heavy contractions, not really jumping with those weights.
Great shoulder mobility for a sprinter.
Yeah.
Oh. He's got... if you're athletic and you wear black pants and any kind of Adidas weightlifting shoes, preferably white
Particularly
ones.
the white ones, yeah.
You look even more athletic. Probably like fucking 11% body fat or something.
I'd love to know what tracking system they're using for the barbell.
I'd like to train at Mathias, to be honest. That gym.
Yeah.
Old school Alico Sweden plates. I've recognised that one. I think I've seen the one at Max Lang before. You just strap it onto the barbell. Pretty expensive, I think, but
yeah,
if you're getting it, it is quite useful. I think it gives you a bar pad as well.
Okay.
Doesn't matter for him, obviously.
No.
So if you are doing Olympic lifts, you're watching these, it's how fast is the really, really important thing to watch here. How fast he's going, you know.
So interestingly there, we got it from like values in the 4 meters per second down to 3.37 or something, or 3.73, and now he's not doing any more Olympic lifts, which I love to see. Like as soon as something slows down, you just stop.
Yeah. So very, very heavy core work, which I think is very interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting. I can't see that being detrimental bar injury risk. It could almost certainly only be beneficial for his running. Oh, the kind of carpet slider thing, but on with the skateboard.
Some more eccentric loading.
Yeah, great little exercise. That's really a little nuanced little exercise.
Yeah.
That's a neat little exercise. Okay, so we're going to move on to another session because he does a bit more Olympic lifts in a different one, and that one is called Autumn Strength Gains, and we're on autumn strength training. Again, great heaving hang cleans, barely even finishing the reps. There's no point in finishing. It's just fast contract. So very nice hang snatches. Look at that. Very skillful lifter, isn't he?
Very good. Yeah.
If I wanted an elite level athlete doing Olympic lifts, this is exactly how I would want them to be doing them. So obviously single leg work is incredibly important for sprinting, and single leg hamstring work would be very, very beneficial.
100 kilo power snatch from the floor.
Yeah.
Plus hang.
Yeah.
Very nice. Plus 2 hangs.
Ooh.
Oh.
So
no velocity meter on the bar there.
If
probably going a bit too slow.
Yeah, I would say. So jerks for a weightlifter or for a sprinter, it does make sense. You get that contraction relaxing. In general, it'd just be too hard to teach a sprinter to do jerks for no reason. Like it wouldn't be. So squats as well. So we got 160 here. I'm gonna say he's around like 75 or 80 kilos body weight.
Okay,
I would guess.
Nice high bar back squat, good positions.
Yeah.
Quite long femurs for somebody who's squatting like that, but very nice.
110 jerks. His shoulders are so loose, aren't they?
Yeah.
Great overhead position, nice straight wrists. Good jerks. The good thing about jerks, they're really self-limiting in the fact that if you're not fast enough, you won't make it.
Yeah.
So, bar the injury risk from mis-racking a jerk or something, there's not a lot of risk with them.
Or hitting your chin.
Or hitting your chin.
There.
Yeah. 130 behind. So 160 squats.
No, they're good heavy lifts. Like,
he's probably one of the stronger sprinters in terms of like even back squats. Like that high force. So that's something that's very interesting. You know, we talked about that in one of our force velocity videos with I think it was weightlifting. So maximum force are usually going to be your slowest velocities. So you're training yourself to move slow, which would never be beneficial especially for sprinting. Like maximum 1RMs, essentially you'd never do a 1RM. Or if you were doing 1RMs, you limit it by, you'd have two variables. You'd say weight used, and then you'd have the velocity, meters per second, and you'd only do a 1RM that was as fast as possible as long as it's above a certain velocity. And if you dropped below a certain velocity, you wouldn't be doing it, but you'd never be going for all out ones. That high force production is almost certainly detrimental. Now, some force production is incredibly important, of course, but that maximum force production is not useful.
If ye are sprinters, or if you're watching this and you have some experience with sprinting, I'd be interested to see what your coach has done with you, like with regards to your squatting. Are you people who'll go and do an off season where you'll squat quite heavy, or is it the kind of classic thing where you'll never kind of bump it up, or it might just be concurrent where you're constantly just trying to edge it forward piece by piece?
110. Oh! Nice save. Great mobility.
Yeah.
120.
Straight into the full.
Yeah.
Very
So,
good mobility.
Probably in the realms of not too beneficial for him.
Yeah.
It doesn't really. There's definitely at this point now we're at the kind of diminishing returns, but it's probably not making things worse.
Just one thing, it's interesting that that's an empty gym with no other sprinters and coaches there.
Yes, yeah,
Isn't
yeah.
it? I wonder, is this a bit of an off-season?
Autumn strength gains. So we've accommodating resistance on the squats.
I really like this.
Yeah.
Like, if ever there was an application for bands.
Yeah. So he's at 210 at the top. So probably a bit slow.
Yeah.
You know, I'd be really paying attention, Finney, for sprinters or high velocity people. Is like, how fast are your lifts moving in the gym? And if it's large, multi-joint, high force movements like that, if they start to get slow, you know, you have a great case for just saying, okay, I'm just going to stop here.
Yeah.
You know, you'd be always looking at that speed. Yeah, I think that's a lot of very interesting stuff from his video. Definitely go check out Matty's YouTube. A lot of great stuff in there for sprinting. A lot of good sprinting training. I don't think he's been sprinting too long, so it'll be interesting to see how his career pans out.
It gives you a very good idea as well for the life of a track and field athlete, you know.
Yeah.
In Europe particularly, like, they're not. There's a lot of sessions there. There's a lot of hard work. Yeah, I really like the stuff they're doing. Obviously, we have questions and different things about everyone's training.
Yeah.
But no, big fan.
I assume he's well taken care of in.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you all again soon.